Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hi, it's Mary Baker, and welcome to episode 47, Owning Your Gifts and Passions. Okay, so in keeping with the theme this month, which has been all about living on purpose and hopefully within your purpose, this week it's all about nailing down what your gifts and passions are if you haven't done so already. Before we get there, I just want to do a shout out to those of you who are sharing the podcast on Facebook. It is going everywhere. Thank you so much. Keep at it. It's really good to get the feedback again, to hear how helpful this has been. All right. So to some of you, this may seem like a real no-brainer. You know, you already know what your talents are and what you're passionate about, and you're living that out pretty well. But what if you're on the other end of the spectrum, where you feel so lost as to what your gifts even are, right? Or your deep down passions. Or maybe you're somewhere in between. I think no matter where you are in the continuum, it's always helpful to take a look at this. I also think this is an evolving journey for each one of us. So even if you have done this in the past, it's always great to take another look because we evolve, we change, and life changes us. Okay, so I think really owning what our gifts are, or our talents, whatever you want to call them, and what we're passionate about, ultimately boils down to self-trust. Many of the episodes here, we have focused on the idea of self-concept, really owning the self. And I think that's what owning it means, and I think that's what true empowerment means. And disowning aspects of ourself never really gets us to great self-confidence. So here's the thing. You already have passions, and you already have gifts. Today, we're just talking about the big issues, usually about owning them. You gotta own them and use them to make them real for you, and to bring them out into the world and to share with others. I think recognizing our gifts can take a while also. Like we've talked about in previous episodes, if we've lost touch with who we are, or we've been in such unhealthy relationships where there really was not a healthy environment to cultivate these things. So be nice to yourself if you're not sure yet. Be even nicer to yourself if you have allowed yourself to put those things on a shelf to be what someone else needed. It's okay. You know, just like we said about purpose last week, don't worry. All we have to do is be open, and it will find us, softly, subtly at times, other times with a crash, very loudly, right? All right. So first, let's take a look at what some typical gifts or talents are. Now, that actual list, I think, is probably endless, and there's no right or wrong here. My encouragement is if you're not sure, online, there are a plethora of different lists of things. Pay attention to whatever speaks to you, whatever resonates with you, whatever makes you go, oh, and don't question it, just note it. Don't judge it. Just observe and say, that's interesting. All right, so here are some, and I'm going to put this in a worksheet as well for you to download. If you're already a tribe member, you got that in your newsletter today. So one of them is networking, making connections. Sometimes people are called gatherers. They're just really innately able to bring people together, and they love gathering souls. They love gathering folks. They love gathering people together to connect for a lot of different reasons. Another gift is to be detail-oriented, right? To be able to parse out the little minute details that might make someone else fall asleep or cringe. What about artistic ability? Cooking, building. Leadership. I think leadership is definitely a gift. Dance or fitness? How about interior decorating or event planning? Maybe you're really good at history or math. Maybe you're excellent at gardening and the neighbors are always knocking on your door for advice. What about teaching? And we can be teachers in all different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean teaching kindergarten. You could have different populations that you love to teach to, that you feel drawn to, from geriatric to a daycare center and everything in between. You could be teaching on the job. Inventing, creating. Maybe it's all about justice. You're really great at the legal argument. Maybe you have amazing mechanical skills or engineering skills. What about conflict resolution? What about writing? Public speaking? Maybe it's entertainment or acting. Maybe it's maintaining. Maybe it's routine tasks that you're really good at. What about the big picture, your conceptual people, your visionaries? And what about parenting? All right, so those by no means are all of them, right? But I hope that you found yourself in maybe one or two or something like. It's really about the process of just noticing and saying, that's interesting. Or maybe it's more like this for me than that, and that's okay. It's about you defining this for you, and it's really about no one else's judgment. We're not going for a job interview here, folks. This is about just really naturally owning the self. All right, so how do you find your gifts or your talents if you're really not quite sure or you have some anxiety about it? First thing you want to do is pay attention to what you naturally love to do as a little kid. We've talked about this before, about getting back to being 4. But also, what happened? Like, were you encouraged or discouraged or ridiculed even, and you dropped it and say, well, hell no, I'm not doing that. They think I'm awful. I've said this before. I can't tell you heartbreakingly how many people I've sat with over the years who have a natural talent, but some unhealthy person squashed that for them at an early age, and it just breaks my heart to think of what they could have become, and actually, more importantly, how fulfilled they might have been. The other thing is, what are you naturally drawn to and enjoy doing just because? Like, no one has to twist your arm. You just naturally like to do it. Just pay attention to that. What have others mentioned about you over the years? What have you received awards for? Or things have been written about you? Where's the evidence, right? You're just collecting data right now. You're just collecting evidence. And it's normal sometimes for some embarrassment to come up like, I can't do that. I can't toot my own horn. Or that's a little egoic or whatever. Don't worry about that right now. It's not all about you. It's just about you right now. There is a difference. You're not going to hurt anybody by owning your wonderful talents. And as we've said in previous podcasts, like, what lights you up? Like, what gives you energy? What animates you? And also, what do you get lost in and lose track of time? And you're like, oh, crap. In a good way. I'm not talking about going down the rabbit hole in a hyper-focused, addictive fashion where you're consumed. That's a little unhealthy and different. This is just something that makes time fly because it's enjoyable or it's intense and you just want to create and you're just in the zone and the rest of the world just melts away for a little bit. That's what I'm talking about. And finally, what just seems so obvious to you as to what to do next and how to do it and where to get the resources, and other people are scratching their head and say, huh? But to you, it's so obvious. We'll just do this. We'll just create this. We'll just make that happen. So it's really, as you can see, a lot of observation. Don't do the try hard here. Be open to allow it to unfold. Look back on your life, gather the evidence. I've said before, interview a couple safe people in your life who are healthy enough to tell you the truth, number one. And number 2, aren't going to be threatened if you follow your dream and have no reason to lie to you. They love you enough to give you tough love and say to you, I think you've always been good at A, B, and C, and here's why. They'll tell you why because it just is. It's just true, right? So accepting reality, as you can see, is a part of this. All right, so owning your gifts and talents, and give yourself plenty of time to do this process. You don't have to have any answers today. It's all good. All right, so the other thing that goes hand in hand often with your talents are, what are you passionate about? What are your passions? And you can have more than one. Some might be bigger than others for you, and that's okay. We don't want to have 25 because that can be overwhelming and exhausting. So think about what gets you revved up, right? Even upset or angry, and you go do something about it. That means you're passionate, like for a cause. Maybe you've experienced something in life and you are really passionate about it because you've walked through the shit and you wish someone had been there to help you and you know what it's like, or people did step up and help you, and that really matters to you. Okay, that'll propel people to give, to volunteer, and perhaps even go into a career to become like the person or people who helped them when they needed it. That's a very common thing. What do you often hone in on, pay attention to, perk up at, make time and training for, keep learning about, right? So there's a website that I will put in the show notes for you to go check out. It's designepiclife.com. They made a list of things to be passionate about, which I think is kind of cool. I wrote down some things here as well. So, one of the things we can be passionate about is our physical health, our health and well-being. And you can parse that out or you can lump it together. It doesn't matter. Some people want holistic well-being, and that's okay. So that person will want to eat healthy. They'll want to meditate a lot, maybe do yoga, walk, exercise, focus on joy, journal, gratitude, all that stuff. What about personal growth? One of my favorites. So they're very passionate about personal growth, and it really matters, and they will support things in their life that's in alignment with that. Maybe it's justice, especially for people who have walked through some awful things growing up or early in life. Justice may be very important to them because they've been on either side of the law with that, and they can see the impacts. Maybe it's beauty. And that could be physical beauty, it could be natural beauty, it could be creating art, architecture, whatever. Beauty matters. Maybe it's entertainment. Maybe it's creating plays or movies or stories or songs. What about medicine? Being very passionate about how medicine can help people heal. Maybe innovation within medicine. Just problem solving, engineering solutions, helping people, making the world a better place, being able to team lead, manage the project. Maybe helping others really, really matters to you, and that could be for a bunch of different reasons. As long as it's not your only reason and you don't get lost in that in a codependent way, it's a great thing to be passionate about. That's why we do this podcast, because we're really all about helping others. Maybe it's storytelling. Maybe it's writing stories or sharing the story or sharing other people's stories. If you're a journalist, you're sharing other people's stories, and that's really important to you. Maybe it's mental health. Maybe it is success. Maybe you don't want people to starve or be poor. Maybe politics really, really matter to you because you see them as a vehicle for change. What about nature? Being outside, maybe working in nature, maybe gardening, things like that. Maybe it's animals. And lastly, maybe it's the environment. Again, not an exhaustive list by any means, but just to give you a sense of things that you can be passionate about. And usually your passions will go together in some larger sense. I mean, they can look kind of disparate on the surface, but if you step back from the painting for a bit, you'll see that they kind of they work together. So again, you can interview folks around you and say, what do you think I'm passionate about? Because boy, they will tell you, because it's going to be so damn obvious. They're like, oh, we know what your soapbox is, or 2 or 3. So it's good. You may already know this, but it's always good to ask 1 or 2 people, again, who are safe, who won't judge you. This is very vulnerable stuff. Please be very careful who you bring this to. I mean that. Take responsibility for that. If you don't have anyone, keep it to yourself. Keep it here with us. Join the Facebook group. We will gently help you figure this out. Of course, the next question is, okay, well, what keeps us from owning our gifts and passions? Like, why does it have to be so hard for some people and not others? And I'll tell you, from sitting with enough people over the years and doing my own work over the years, here are some things that I believe. And folks may argue with me, and that's okay. I think it's the cocktail of fear and shame. Nasty cocktail. You've heard me say that before. And the thing is, isn't shame really just fear underneath, right? That we're not okay? Shame is, I'm not enough. That even if I identified my gifts and what I'm passionate about, I can immediately compare out and say, oh shit, that's not as good as what she's got going on. Why wasn't I given that gift or talent for fill in the blank? So getting stuck in outsourcing our sense of self, right? We're looking to other people. We're comparing ourselves to them, forgetting who we really are. That comes from growing up in unhealthy families where you were either overtly or covertly judged and compared to others. Teachers can do this without even knowing it. Parents can do it. Like, why can't you sit nicely like your brother? There you go. Why can't you finish your dinner like your sister? Why can't you color in the lines like your sister does? So immediately, we're like, oh crap, I'm not good enough is the message. So that's where that can come from for you. And it's bogus and it's not true. Don't listen to it anymore. You are enough just as you are. And you are the only one who gets to look at that, maybe change it or tweak it or develop it or whatever you want to do. Shame is also I can't or I shouldn't. Don't shine. Remember, don't outshine the family. Don't look better than your sister or your mom or your dad or your cousins or the other kids in the class because they can't handle it. If you grew up in an environment where folks really struggled with their own self-esteem or they did not develop their own gifts or embrace them, they're going to have a really hard time with you embracing yours, especially if it's not something they agree with. Because parents who are not individuated kind of live vicariously through their kids. I know we've all heard that, but they can do it without knowing it. It's not malicious. It's just that they've never resolved their own shit from their childhood, so they are trying to live it out through their kid. Or they want their kid to have what they didn't, that kind of thing. And it can be a very narrow view. What the parents think, quote unquote, that the child should have that they didn't may not be what the child wants or needs. So accepting differences, detaching and allowing others to just be. If you didn't have that growing up, you may have heard, I can't or I shouldn't. And also if you grew up in very anxious households who did not like to take a risk, and they're like, be careful every time you go out the door. Yeah, that's kind of hard. They're not going to be parents who are going to support you going after things and really taking a risk and failing, right? And getting back up and trying again. It's hard to stay safe and risk at the same time. Now I'm talking about calculated risks, of course. Shame is I don't deserve. If your gift puts you in the spotlight, you could really embrace that and get lots of needs met, maybe to unhealthy degrees at some points, or that could be terrifying, like stage fright, social anxiety, because being in the moment at home probably didn't go well. It was either shame-filled or maybe often terrifying or just awful and uncomfortable and emotionally unsafe. So those folks will shy away from the limelight. So if you put your talent out there, you're going to have attention paid to you, and that's going to be scary. So a lot of people will bury their talents, right? So they don't have to go through that again, or they think that's what it's going to be like. What they don't realize is even though there are judgmental people out there, there are also other people who will love you and embrace you and just be thrilled to see you use your gifts. Remember, you do deserve, because we all do. We all deserve to just do what comes naturally to us and use our talents and not, stuff them away or make them about someone else or deny the self. And we also forget that often it isn't about us. I mean, what if your gift is to be a great doctor? I mean, that's to help others. So a lot of people say it's pretty damn selfish, right, to not put your gift out there because you're not helping anyone. So, of course, it goes without saying, shame means I'll be rejected or abandoned. You'll leave me if I am different, if I outshine you. What if you don't like me? What if you don't like what I have to say or do? It's the imposter syndrome. Because shame is I can't own those fabulous parts of me, and you can. Shame is a liar. Fear is a liar. And if you had awful experiences as a kid, I want you to firmly evaluate them. Logically, realistically, gather all of your evidence. Because what you're probably going to find is there's going to be evidence where healthy people said, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Look at you. Look how well you draw. And a parent says to you with snark at dinner, yeah, you'll never make any money doing that. Or you're not as good as the real famous people. You're probably going to see contrasting evidence is my point. And I want you to write it all down because it's all a part of your story that you want to heal going forward. So what are some of the tools, right? If you grew up with shame and fear, social anxiety, people who couldn't support you, siblings that were jealous, parents that were jealous, the first antidote is courage. And it's courage to first just name them. Name your talents, and maybe it's just one. Just name it. Just put it down on paper. Say, I am. I am great at. I love to. People love when I. It's so enjoyable too. I get lost when I. Name your gifts and your talents. Make them real. Own them with a smile. I love the concept. Not everybody believes this, and that's okay. But the idea that these were gifts that were given to you, maybe from something greater than yourself, or maybe the universe, to help others, to be a part of something greater than yourself. So there's a little bit of a loophole there where you're like, oh, I can't help it. They were given to me, right? And if you kind of sit there for a moment and think about it, a lot of gifts exist in spite of us, not because of us. So that can get you off the hook if you need to be there. Later, you won't. Share with a few safe people only. Make it real. Put it out loud. At least start formulating a plan to make it real. Just even doing that changes the way your subconscious views it because it now sees it as possible. Think in terms of possibility. Don't be negative. Don't say, well, what if and if... No. Don't do any of the obstacles yet. Just put it down. The other big piece to healing this is self-compassion. So if you look back in your past, like we've been talking about the past few moments, and you see where you were wounded in these areas, again, it takes one music teacher in 5th grade to blow it for somebody. What experiences did you have? Write letters to yourself at that age. Visually practice seeing yourself, your little face at that age, looking at you as your grown-up self and saying, I am so sorry that you didn't get to get further training in this or pursue this dream. I want to try to honor that in some way for us today. This is a huge piece for empowerment, stepping into who you really are and looking back on your story and healing. And this isn't about naming bad guys. I mean, anybody who wounded you either did it because they didn't mean to, or they were just really messed up on the inside. Hurt people hurt people. Empathy for yourself. If you knew what your talents were and you stuck them on a shelf to be in a relationship, to live for someone else, to take care of everyone else's needs. Look back again, 5 dominoes. Where did I learn how to be a caretaker? You've been listening to the episode. You know what I'm talking about. Go back and revisit some of those on childhood and grieving if you haven't. Listen to the episodes on boundaries if you haven't. Give yourself a break. The next thing you can do is instead of focusing on your fears, I mean, they're there. There's no point in denying them. But what's more important? What's your desire? What would be in your eulogy if you wrote it? Really? Would you want it to say someone who never pursued their dreams or their gifts or their talents, or someone who did? Who someone at least took a crack at it, even at 72, right? They got brave and they went and did it. So owning the consequences of not owning your gifts or passions, I really want you to sit in that for a little while and get pissed at if you have to, or get scared as hell, like, oh my God, I'm not getting any younger here. I really want to do something about this. Get passionate. When we get into choice, we get into the front part of our head instead of our fight or flight system. I talk about that a lot. Get out of fear and into choice and watch the magic happen. Your gifts are never going to want you or ask you to hide. Okay, so I want you to think about these things, and it might be how you're using your gift too might be not as appropriate or not as genuine, not as authentic. Like really funny people who make everyone in the room crack up, they might be using humor as a defense. Maybe they can use their humor in healthier ways while having better relationships. So you don't want to hide with it. A big thing we need to do is if you're going to be working on this, you can't be living in toxicity. You've heard me say that. You can't be living with a manipulator or 2 or 4. You can't be living in an environment where people hate themselves, where people are nasty to you, where people just aren't ready to get unstuck, right? They're comfortable in their misery, so to speak. And they know they're going to lose you if you really step out. You got to first grab a few folks who won't feel threatened by that. People who can just let you have your feelings and your thoughts and your choices and your ideas and your gifts. A big, big piece of this, guys, is your self-talk. How are you speaking to yourself? I want you to look at how compassionate and loving and kind it is. It's okay to do a fair, honest assessment today and say, wow, I have not really been living these out. Take responsibility for that without beating yourself up, please. We can't shame ourselves into good behavior. I just heard Gabby Bernstein on a podcast the other day was saying how shame gets in the way of the brain actually learning. Isn't that crazy? You got to get shame out of the way. You can't beat yourself up and live a life that you love. It's not possible to have both. You have to choose one. And what are ways that you can feel good about yourself intrinsically? Just be careful. You're going to look out there. You're going to externalize, jump right back in and say, what do I want? How do I want to be proud of myself? This isn't about anybody else. This is about me. Again, boundaries, 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 right? Just because I doesn't mean they. Just because they doesn't mean I. What do I want? What do I want to take responsibility for? Stay away from manipulation, like I keep saying this, right? It's important if I repeat it. Stay away from others with wounded self-esteem right now. Others who could not honor themselves, and therefore there's no way in hell they can honor you. There's too much anxiety. And they're not trying to hurt you. They just can't. I want you to think about times in your life where you were just not supportive to people you love. You were just sitting in the shit and you could not be there. You could lip service it, right? So it happened to all of us. So this is very fragile and very vulnerable. Let me repeat. This is very fragile and very vulnerable to own your gifts, to own your passions. You are risking putting your authentic self out there, not the codependent false self that's there to be what everyone else needs. It's who you really, really are. It's standing on stage and the bright lights on you, right? So you have to have acceptance and love and some safety and a little bit of anxiety, enough to be excited, and get out of your box. And you need one or two people who will love you out of your box, but not judge you when you're standing inside your box shaking, because you don't want to get out. Do a little bit at a time. You've heard me say, stretch the membrane bit by bit. Just be open. Just observe. Start writing some of this down. See what you think. Put it down. Come back to it. Talk to people. Read about it. Think about it. Come back to it. Journal about it. Come back to it. This is a process, folks. This stuff does not happen overnight. Hopefully, you've already downloaded the worksheet to use this week. That'll help you label your own gifts and passions. And for those of you looking to find your purpose or the next phase of your life or career or calling, this is a great resource because this is kind of what you're going to have to do. It's basically one of the worksheets. It's called a Venn diagram where two circles overlap. Then the work is to find the intersection of your gifts and your talents and what you're passionate about. I call it the sweet spot. The sweet spot you may have to come to find as you walk your path. I believe that we have to experience some things. Things need to be revealed to us sometimes. We've got to learn some things. We got to work through our shit. We got to get rid of our dysfunctional patterns. So it's all good. Wherever you are is okay. All right. Wow. That was a lot. So today we talked about naming your gifts and your passions. We looked at what can get in the way of doing so. And I hope you grab this. The absolute cost of disowning who you really are. My hope is that you're able to grab some helpful things for you, even just one thing. And I hope it makes you stretch and grow because you can. I know you can. All right. So next week, we're going to get real about, all right, what's going to need to change, right, in your life in order for you to really become who you really are. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you're safe, teetering on insanity, as most of us are in quarantine. I hope you stay healthy and grounded and hold on to hope. Focus on the good in yourself, on your gifts, and those in others. Be sure to check the show notes at www.ownitpowercast.com to sign up for the newsletter each Tuesday if you already haven't. That way you'll get the bonus downloads for this episode and for past episodes. You can really take the work even further. All right, pay it forward. Keep owning all the wonderful things about you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.